PMI is to reduce malaria deaths by 50% in 15 of the world's worst hit countries, all of which are in sub-Saharan Africa. The program, which promises to increase funding to fight the disease by $1.2 billion over the next 5 years, has already provided PMI-supported prevention and treatment measures for 25 million people in sub-Saharan Africa. We are working closely with the private sector in this fight against malaria. President Bush always says that a baby shouldn't die just because it's bitten by a mosquito. And that's really, I think, the spirit of the PMI initiative. In collaboration with African governments, we will intensify our work to develop sustainable healthcare infrastructure so African nations can address health challenges through their own national institutions. Finally, our conflict resolution initiative or priority is critically important for the progress on the continent. And in the past 7 years, we have seen the end of 7 major conflicts: the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Burundi, Cote d'Ivoire, the North-South conflict in Sudan, and in Angola. Many lives have been saved, but the current peace is fragile in some of these countries. Conflict in Darfur continues, and violence and volatility in Somalia threatens the peace and stability of the entire Horn of Africa region. Yet Africa has demonstrated a trend toward conflict resolution and stability. And while ending wars is an essential part of our Africa policy priorities, we believe that to sustain long-term peace and stability on the continent, it is not enough to just end the wars. But we must embrace the concept of post-conflict democratic transition, basically going from A to Z. This administration has practiced this in several African countries such as Liberia, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Mauritania. Post-conflict countries are especially ripe for post-conflict democratic transition. The institutions are very fluid, and they can be established and restructured to strengthen government accountability and transparency. It is also a good time to work with civil society organizations to combat gender-based violence, trafficking in persons, and other human rights violations. In 2007, the U.S. provided close to $175 million for programs to promote just and democratic governance and democratic nations. Again, as I said, especially focused on post-conflict countries. In 2004, we also launched the Global Peace Operations Initiative, what is called GPOI, which provides $600 million over 5 years to train 40,000 African peacekeepers. And since 2005, the U.S. has trained over 39,000 African peacekeepers in 20 countries. We have trained over 80% of African peacekeepers who are currently deployed in AU and UN missions, both inside and outside of Africa. And the outside of Africa is important because Africans are sharing the burden of international peace and security by supplying 30% of UN peacekeeping forces worldwide, with 4 countries, Ethiopia, Ghana, Nigeria, and South Africa, among the top 10 UN troop contributing countries globally. Increasingly, illegal trans-border activity is challenging progress in conflict resolution and democratization in the region. Because large portions of Africa are weakly governed, with borders often ill-defined, Africans are vulnerable to international terrorist organizations and drug and human trafficking. This threat affects Africa perhaps more than any other part of the world. Through counterterrorism-related initiatives such as the Trans-Saharan Counterterrorism Partnership, often known as TSCTP, and the East Africa Regional Strategic Initiative, we are working with our African and European partners to promote 4 strategic goals: fostering regional cooperation, building law enforcement and military capacity, countering radicalization, and enhancing public diplomacy and strategic communications to counter and contain the activities of Al-Qaeda and other affiliated terrorist groups in Africa. In closing, I would like to reemphasize the U.S. foreign policy approach in Africa. we seek strategic partnerships with African nations to build institutions that will sustain progress and stability across generations. The goal is to work with a network of well-governed sovereign states that are responsible and are able to protect themselves, contribute to regional security, and support the international system. We are also helping to build the regional and sub-regional organizations that can further institutionalize and sustain progress on the good governance, economic, and conflict resolution fronts. In Secretary Rice's words, we seek to use America's diplomatic power to help foreign citizens better their own lives, build their own nations, and transform their own futures. With greater security, disease prevention, and political and economic freedom, the African continent of the 21st century can become the powerhouse that I am convinced it can be. Thank you very much.